Heretic.
Good afternoon. Mr. Reed, are you interested in learning more about the Church of Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
Heretic is a 2024 psychological horror thriller involving two sister missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints being invited into a man's house, but little do they know, their beliefs will be pushed to their limits and beyond. Normally, I don't really say much about my human life here on the channel because that was never the direction I really wanted to go, but I feel compelled to say that I am very familiar with the church that the main actresses are part of in this movie. I'm also very familiar with the work that they do during the movie itself, and I'll just leave it at that because I definitely prefer to keep the channel on the more entertaining side and not the personal emotional side, because there is only so much entertainment I can pull from my sugarless green jello contribution at a white person's Thanksgiving that is my personality. So here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna review this movie with a fair amount of spoilers, and I'm gonna point out all of the little details and aspects of the movie that I like and don't like from a religious perspective and as a horror fanatic. Let's try to have some fun with some religious horror and get spooky. The movie starts off introducing our sister missionaries, Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton. And I gotta say, I'm actually very happy to see both these actresses in the horror genre again. If you didn't notice, Sister Barnes was in The Boogeyman.
It's not real. It's okay.
I know that one was a bit divisive, but I liked it. She was also in Maxine, which I am a big fan of, and Yellow Jackets. I haven't seen that one, but I've heard plenty of good things. While Sister Paxton was in The Wolf of Snow Hollow.
John, they're saying it's a big bear, big jaws.
No, it's a man. When do I get to be right about something?
And that's a personal favorite horror comedy of mine. So I am very happy to see them in the horror industry again and give some of the other modern Scream Queen contenders a run for their money. The movie starts off with the two sisters on a park bench talking about condoms.
That's not a good start, but keep going.
Yeah, this whole intro does the entire movie a serious disservice. This would never actually happen. Missionaries in this church are very cautious about how they present in public. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I wasn't paying attention and I'm just feeding the murderous rage that dwells within me. I saw that the bench that they were sitting on had an advertisement for condoms, and that is how this conversation started. Makes sense. However, this is a public place. I'm not going to go as far as to say that this kind of convo would never happen with sister missionaries, but it wouldn't happen in an English-speaking mission in public. This is something that would maybe come up at their home after the workday is done and like right before bed or something. And then Sister Paxton does something outrageous. She tells a short story about a video that she saw where someone was about to film an adult movie, if you catch my drift.
Giggity. What? Nothing. It's stupid.
And someone walks in on the scene and it all stops from happening, and that is how Sister Paxton says that she got her belief in God.
What? Oh, come on!
This is so stupid. This is so outlandish, it comes across as pretty insulting that this is how someone actually found their faith. Don't worry there, kiddos, I do have a solution to how this could have gone over much better. You see, right now we are supposed to be getting to know these two characters and how they are different, and a very easy way to do that and still come across as authentic would be for them to be discussing why they are there. There are plenty of reasons why people become missionaries. They either internally want to do it, their parents tell them to do it, all of their friends are doing it, some people even do it because their boyfriend or girlfriend is doing it, so they do it at the same time as them. Point is, this intro sucks, but please be patient. Not to jump the gun, but this movie does quickly redeem itself here. There are a few scenes where you see the day-to-day of them walking and getting from one place to another, and there is this huge hill where they're carrying their bikes up these flights of stairs, and Paxton, the more innocent one, says for each flight of stairs that they climb, their future husband gets hotter. And they laugh, and this is a cute scene and very accurate to the kind of stuff missionaries do in the face of all the physically demanding aspects of their mission, and they're just kind of trying to pass the time with a little bit of conversation within each other. Later on, some kids want to pose with the sisters for a picture. One of them makes a comment about magic underwear and pantses Paxton in public. Now, I've never heard of this personally happening to anyone, but it wouldn't be super surprising if it did. Kids are a-holes, especially American kids. So Paxton is trying to recoup from that humiliating experience, and Barnes, the more experienced missionary with way more success in the field, tries to cheer her up and get back to work with the goal of getting her a conversion, which is something Barnes is familiar with, but would be a first time for Paxton. Again, very on par with what would actually happen in real life. They look up their schedule and they go to Mr. Reed's house, played by Hugh Grant. Now, this may not be his horror debut, but it's definitely the first horror that he's been in decades, so welcome back to the club. We have a bit of hazing that is a tradition here, but don't worry, it's not that big a deal.
You don't know me, but I know you. I want to play a game.
So the sisters are standing in the rain and are very eager to talk to Mr. Reed about the church, and he invites them in. But they say that they can't unless there is a woman present, and he says, "Oh yes, my wife is in here." And they say, "Oh, that's perfect," and they just come on in. They start doing an introduction to the lesson, but Reed asks them some personal questions to get to know the sisters. Nothing strange here. I mean, normally they would have started with the personal stuff, but not a big deal. But he does bust out his own Book of Mormon, the religious scripture that is unique to the church the girls represent. He surprises them by busting out a lot of stuff about the church that he has researched. And the girls are taken back a bit, thinking that they were just going to be talking to a guy who was just a little curious about the church. But we are only 10 minutes or so into the movie, and Mr. Reed has shown us that he is actually a religious philosopher, and he knows quite a lot about religions. He even goes as far as to say that the more you know, the less you know. The last thing that he wanted to do was to find the one true religion. But that's exactly what happened to him. Just to pause here, this movie is dialogue heavy. I have seen some people say that the movie is a bit boring, but this is exactly what I was expecting out of the movie going in, and so far, it is delivering pretty well. And Mr. Reed even brings up some hot topics of the church's infancy, and at first, as someone who is, again, familiar with the church, I was a little bummed that there wasn't more pushback on this part. However, the more I thought about it, the more on brand this interaction actually would be, which is why missionaries are told to not do debates or argue too much during lessons. There are lots of people who just want to argue. It's kind of like a political debate. No one who is actually doing the debating really ever changes their mind. They are firm in what they believe and are ready to fire back and forth with each other. Those kinds of debates are more for other people listening in. Those people can be swayed. But there are little signs here and there that show that Mr. Reed invited the sisters to learn from him, not the other way around. There is a small gripe moment where Paxton says that she would like to be reincarnated as a butterfly and would land on people's hands for comfort.
Are you retarded? Poop in the shoes. Are you a retarded person?
Poop on the shoes!
Yeah, not only do people of this church not believe in reincarnation, but this feels like a very tacked on piece of dialogue to make Paxton seem more like a kid at heart than anything else, and it does not land well. But again, it's not a big deal. Mr. Reed excuses himself to go to grab some pie that everyone has been smelling, and while he is gone, Barnes flips around the candle in the room and realizes that the scent was blueberry, the pie that he was baking.
Uh-oh, spaghetti-o.
So they try to book it while he is away. Problem is that he took their coats, and Barnes's coat has the bike lock key, and there was a storm outside and they are a few miles away from anywhere that they are familiar with, but they both are like, screw it, let's just go. But the door won't open. Double uh-oh. So they go down the hallway to find Mr. Reed to get out. And this is where I am going to have to skim a lot of the film. Like I said, this is a very dialogue-heavy movie, and it was impossible for me to take notes while listening because I would have had to have written down everything that these people were saying, and that would have made this review super lame. So, to quickly summarize, the only way that these girls can leave is through the back part of the house. And Mr. Reed gives them their coats, and the bike lock is actually no longer in Barnes's coat, it's in Paxton's coat. Remember that because it'll be important later. Mr. Reed goes on a huge rant of the major religions being so similar and even comparing them to board games and how marketing and manipulation is a key factor in all of them, and it's very well written. And personally, I found a hole or two in his rant that did bother me for a moment, and I was about to knock this movie down a peg, but then Sister Barnes gets a chance to speak up and demolishes near everything he said. He brings up a lot of similarities between religions, reasons, but she's quick to point out how incredibly disingenuous it is to only focus on the similarities and completely ignore the differences. During his rant, he doesn't contextualize a single thing. I loved this clapback. Not only does it give the girls, or mostly Barnes, a chance to flex that not only was she paying attention to what he was saying, but she also knows her stuff, and on top of that, she played it safe. They have not forgotten that they are essentially trapped in this guy's house, so they still need to play it cool in order to get out of there. I cannot begin to tell you how refreshing this is. Very often in horror movies, people who are clearly being held captive make terrible decisions with their choice of words. Most of the time it is to their detriment. There are a few horror movies where characters berating and barking back to their captors give them like a window of opportunity and it actually works out, but I would say a majority of the time, they play their hand too hard and too fast and they end up regretting it. They try bringing up a phone call telling them that they need to leave, but Mr. Reed harkens back to some dialogue that he mentioned before, that there was metal in his walls and roof, meaning no one can make calls in his house. Triple uh-oh. This is important to remember because not only is this another example of the whole situation being premeditated, but this is also very good writing because he did mention this before. If you haven't seen this movie and plan on it, the movie is very good at leaving breadcrumbs and foreshadowing revelations that do pay off, so pay attention. So now is the time for the girls to make a choice. And I say choice in quotes, you'll find out in a sec why. They have to choose between two doors, belief and disbelief. The sisters are divided. Paxton goes to disbelief because she thinks that's what Mr. Reed wants and thinks that that's what he's just proven. Barnes is firm in them going to belief because it's more honest to what they really believe. Barnes opens the door and quickly shuts it, then goes to the other door and opens it. They both lead to a basement. Ah, you see, they were both going to the same place. They eventually go because there is no other place to go. He says his front door is on a timer and they won't open until morning. They go down to a small dark room with a window and a very high ceiling that is constantly leaking, and there's no way out. Barnes hands Paxton a letter opener that she was able to grab. Paxton has a hard time accepting it, but Barnes convinces her that she can't have it because he's been watching her like a hawk. They will use a code word, magic underwear, for when to strike, but still says that they need to go the intellectual route and try to talk their way out of this because there is no way that they will be able to overpower him. Reed speaks into his speaker saying that during his discovery of religion, he found a true prophet, and that before them, they will witness a miracle. And a homely, decrepit woman enters into the room and places on a table a blueberry pie and eats it. Reed explains that the pie has been poisoned and soon the woman would die and then resurrect. And lo and behold, she dies, and the girls check her pulse and breathing, nothing. Meanwhile, the doorbell rings and Reed goes to answer. It's an elder, played by Topher Grace.
Believe me, I'm not cheap.
Fine. Free. Whatever.
I really don't know why they picked him for this role. No offense to him, the guy doesn't seem to be busy with much, but he is a bit higher in the acting field than what would be required for a role that asks nothing of him. They say he is an elder, like a fellow missionary like them, but just a guy. And I know the guy has looked like a teenager for 30 years, but still, they should have just said he was the mission president, the guy in charge over them. Would have been much more believable. Mr. Reed is able to shoo him away, and he does leave. You may be wondering why he didn't bring up the bikes out front. Ah, don't you worry, my spooky friends, this writing is still very good, it will come up eventually. While Reed is handling Topher Grace, the sisters are trying to get their hands on some matches near the door by pulling on a rug. They get back down the stairs and Paxton says the dead woman moved, but Barnes convinces her that she's just remembering where she was wrong. As they are trying to light a match to signal for help, the old woman gets up and speaks about the afterlife. She says some vague things and finishes with a, "It's not real." Mr. Reed comes down and takes the woman away and asks them, what did they witness? Barnes ain't buying it. The things the woman said was just what people see when they have a near-death experience, which she has had before. Ah, I bet you didn't see that coming, did you, Reed? She calls out what she thought has happened wasn't actually a miracle, it's just a magic trick. And right before she's about to say magic again, we see Paxton go for the letter opener and the scene quickly cuts to Barnes' throat being slit. My jaw was on the floor here. I kept thinking the same line over and over. Subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Huh?
Okay. The line I really mean is...
What just happened?
Then finally we see Reed putting a box cutter back into his pocket. Phew! The editing was very well done. I was convinced that Paxton did the throat slicing and this story was going to end up with the innocent girl being self-interested and choosing her life over her friends. Seen that in a few movies, but that didn't happen here, and I was pretty relieved about it. Paxton books it for the door, screaming for help, but of course, help won't come. She gives up and goes back down to talk to Reed. He mentions that he can bring Barnes back, but Paxton remembers what Barnes said about challenging his intellect. Reed caves and says, I actually can't bring Barnes back. But then he goes and digs into her bicep at a little scar that we've seen before and pulls out a little metal tube saying that Barnes was never real, or more likely a robot of some kind. And then goes on this rant about this thought experiment and the results of it, and once he finished, Paxton gives him a big ol'
Nah.
Paxton says the little rod he found was a birth control thing, and Barnes kept it a secret because the church would have shamed her for it.
What? Oh, come on!
Yeah, this is my second major gripe with the movie. The church would not have done that. There is no official statement against contraceptives. Also, I'm a guy.
What? Oh, come on!
I know, shocking for those of you who didn't know. But even I have known since I was like a teenager that chicks are on birth control all the time for reasons unrelated to sleeping around. Some of them just get really crappy periods, and it's just a way to manage those. But we had a lot of good in between my two gripes here, so let's keep going. Paxton calls Mr. Reed out for improvising, and it's not really sticking. So now Paxton gets her time to shine as the smart chick because Barnes took all the lines before. Paxton thinks that the woman in the room really died, and while the girls were distracted, someone who looked like her came in and swapped out the bodies, and Reed gave the woman a script to read from, but the last line was off script when she said, "It's not real." That could be interpreted that heaven is not real, or this whole experiment was not real. Reed pushes back. If that's true, how did I do it? You've seen the only doors in and out of the place. So she looks around and dumps all of the water that was leaking into the room onto the ground, and it seeps into the ground fast. So she digs around and finds a handle and opens a secret door in the floor. Reed responds, "Not so fast. In order to prove your theory, you have to go down there and find a body. Also, if you go down there, you will find the one true religion, and you don't want that." She goes down anyway. Once she gets to the bottom, she almost immediately sees the body and says, "I knew it." And Reed closes the hatch on her. She goes deeper into the tunnel and sees a door with their bike lock on it. She takes the key out of her pocket and sees a room full of old decrepit women in cages that look exactly like the one from before. She offers one of them her coat, and Reed comes into the room and asks, "What is the one true religion?" Paxton breaks down what happened, or what she thinks happened. When they first got there, Mr. Reed excused himself to grab them refreshments, and she noticed that when he came back, his hair was wet. She figures that he went outside and grabbed their bikes and the bike lock. He then intentionally switched the keys in their coats, and at first she thought it was a simple mistake, but now realizes that this was his plan all along. It didn't matter what Barnes and Paxton did. They were never in control. He wanted Paxton to be down there and figure all of this out. The one true religion is control.
That is correct!
Reed goes on and says that it's incredibly easy to control people when you have taken everything from them or when they have lost everything. He even follows up with a "why did you let me" line, which reminded me of Speak No Evil.
Why are you doing this? Because you let me.
Yeesh, this is such a chilling scene. Also, a good movie. He goes on and on how power can get people to do anything that he wants. Eat a poisoned pie, or wear magic underwear. And right there, Paxton stabs him in the neck with the letter opener. She then books it out of there, and we get the famous scene of her running, and it transitions back and forth from the little model house to reality. Cool shot. Paxton is able to get into a new room, but sadly she can't find a way out of there, and turns around and Reed stabs her in the stomach with his box cutter. She's on the floor bleeding and Reed asks her to say a prayer for them. She goes on and brings up the praying experiment and says prayers don't actually work, but she thinks that that's what makes them beautiful, to ask and think of others regardless. This is not what religious people believe when it comes to prayers. Think about it, if prayers were actually answered on a dime at any moment and exactly the way you wanted them to be answered, it would be very easy to prove that not only that there is a God, but also you'd be able to suss out which religion is true. But I gave the scene a pass because she still believes in doing prayers, and right there, she says one. And Reed crawls towards her, bleeding out, and right as he is about to stab her again, Barnes comes in like it's the bottom of the ninth and slams a wood board with a few nails sticking out of it into Reed's head, killing him. This does make sense, and not for 1 second did I think this was a cop-out for bad writing, because when her throat got slit earlier, it wasn't a gusher, and your body does go into shock all the time to try to preserve itself, so her coming back to save Paxton was really nice. But sadly, Barnes does officially die. Paxton mourns her death, and she eagerly pries into Reed's model home, and I'm a little confused. Help me out in the comments if you noticed. I thought she was looking for like a key, but it kinda seemed like she found a spot where a window would be. I don't know. We see a window slam on the ground and Paxton is finally out of the house and she calls for help. We see a little butterfly land on her hand, but it turns out to be her imagination and the movie ends. Okay, I'm just gonna pretend that that's not the last scene of the movie, because that was kinda dumb, and again, a tacked on part that references a tacked on line. And that's Heretic. How was it? Honestly, the more I think about it, the more I want to see this movie again. I really liked it. And now that I know the parts that suck, again, as someone who is very familiar with the church, I can look over or just glance on my phone while it's happening. I don't think those parts bring the movie down as a whole. If you are a member of the church and are planning on seeing the film, honestly, just walk in like 5 minutes late and you'll probably be totally fine with everything. For everyone else who focuses more on the movie aspect or the horror aspect, thank you for sticking around. I have 2 things against the film. First, Sister Barnes gets a lot of lingering look shots. It very much gave off the impression that she was gonna come out and say that she doesn't really believe in the church or something along those lines, which would have been predictable, and I'm glad it didn't happen and both sisters were firm in their faith. But thinking back, those lingering shots seemed like they were going to lead somewhere, but they ended up being nowhere, like a line or two from the movie was cut or something. Not a huge gripe, but it's a hole that I thought of when I left the theater. Also, it's shown, I think, in every trailer of the movie, the model house and the sister running through it, giving off the impression that the house was like a puzzle box or a maze for the sisters to figure out how to escape. It's not that kind of movie, and I do think that's the fault of the marketing, but also, there really is not much of a point to this in the story. We see Reed make little models of the girls and put into the little home, but it amounts to nothing, cause like, where else are they gonna go? 90% of this movie takes place in 3 rooms. Yeah, the house is built in a way where the rooms connect oddly and there are secrets and whatnot, but it really was not that much of a puzzle to escape. Okay, the positives. Everyone nailed their roles here. Seriously, I hope they all get solid movie roles after this one. They earned it. I hope this movie makes a ton of money too. This was top-notch writing, especially with the dialogue. At first you can get the impression that Mr. Reed has somewhat decent intentions. Like he really does want to actually test these girls' faith and really see if they are really believers. But the more you get into the movie and the more you think about it, Mr. Reed is a mastermind psychopath. Right from the get-go, he is a liar, he is a manipulator, and does and says things in bad faith. And he is also very charming and very smart, so he does have likable traits that makes him stand out as a solid villain. And Barnes and Paxton are very likable characters. They're smart, resilient, resourceful, and they have each other's backs. Yeah, Barnes took the lead because she was the more experienced missionary from the start, but once she's taken out of the picture, Paxton did not disappoint. This was a goodie, and I'm glad I saw it opening night. Thanks for watching. Stay spooky.